All right. Today was an interesting day. So I woke up at like 10 a.m. as usual because I'm a lazy piece of crap. And I was like, you know what? I feel like losing money today. So normally what I do is I wake up on Fridays because I'm unemployed AF on Fridays, and I'll maybe trade some stocks or something, lose like a lot of money. And so I decided today was the day that I would continue doing that because I was bored. And then I open up I checked some stocks and I'm like, wait, none of these stock prices have moved. And I'm like, is today a holiday? And I checked my calendar as June 19, and I was like, wait, that's right, it is a holiday. And I realized it was Juneteenth. And I'm like really stupid when it comes to just everything in general. I'll be honest, and including holidays, I'll be honest, I don't even really know what Christmas is, like where Christmas came from. St. Patrick, I think. No, wait, that's the Green Day. Saint Nicholas, I think that's what. See, like that's how bad it is. So, anyways, I was like, you know what? This year I'm gonna stop being like an idiot, and I'm gonna start learning about these different holidays and just about different stuff in general because I need to stop being retarded because it's pretty bad and embarrassing if I'm being quite honest. So I decided that, you know what? I'm gonna learn what Juneteenth is about because I actually failed the AP US history exam for high school. I studied like my butt off for it too, but I'm just not like a history person, so did not pass it. So I was like, you know what? Let's make a change and let's become more historically acquainted. So decided to learn a little bit about Juneteenth and decided that I would, maybe explaining things helps you learn things. So I'm just going to explain what Juneteenth is about. So essentially, the main purpose of Juneteenth is to kind of, remember African American culture. It's also to celebrate, kind of the resilience that, African Americans went through during that period of time. And usually how it's celebrated is, sometimes people will have parades, they'll have cookouts, things like that. Spending time with family, I would say, is probably the biggest way to celebrate Juneteenth. It's really cool because apparently the foods that are enjoyed are typically red in nature. So a fun fact, red velvet cake is, if you want to eat red velvet cake, Juneteenth is the day to eat red velvet cake. That is a fun fact. Strawberries, anything red. So yeah, essentially the whole purpose of Juneteenth, it's also to kind of remember the importance and the pursuit of civil rights and equality. So that's kind of the purpose and significance of Juneteenth. In June 17 of not too long ago, actually it does feel pretty long ago now, is back in 2021. So this was not really celebrated as a federal holiday until quite recently. So 2021, June 17, 2021, it was officially mandated. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but officially listed as a federal holiday. And so after that, people, kind of began not going to work and celebrating Juneteenth. But the story about Juneteenth is pretty important as well. So I would say, so there are essentially three dates that are pretty significant for understanding, Juneteenth. The first date would be actually January 1st of 1863. The second date, obviously June 19 of 1865. And then the final date would be December 6th of 1865 as well. So the first date signifies pretty much essentially the beginning of the end of slavery. And that was the date where Abraham Lincoln was signed into law, essentially an executive order of the Emancipation Proclamation. And that's pretty much where he was saying no more slavery. So in that time, in the 1860s, the southern states would practice slavery, and it was a huge part of their economy, whereas the northern states were, they were the Union, and the southern states were the Confederates, and, Confederates versus Union, that was the Civil War. And essentially they didn't want slavery anymore. And so the Union won. And so after the Emancipation Proclamation, they're like, no more slavery. So, however, the southern states, obviously this was, like I said, a huge part of their economy. they would still, sort of, why would they kind of tell, the slaves that are working for them, like, oh, hey, the president just signed, this law, or just made this executive order that we can't essentially use you guys for our own, like, greed or for our own money making purposes, right? There would be no reason for them to do that. And it's not like they had like TV or like a system where everybody was aware of some sort of news all at once like we have today, right? Like you post something or something happens in the world and everybody finds out on Instagram Reels literally in like 2 hours. They didn't have anything like that. So it was probably kept secret or quiet for a while, and it literally like 63 to 65, so like almost 2 years, where nobody, well, not nobody, but some of the states and some of the slaves had no idea that slavery wasn't accepted anymore or was illegal or whatever. So what ended up happening, the second important date, was June 19th of 1865, and that was when General Gordon Granger or something, came to Galveston, Texas. So Texas was kind of separated from the other Confederate states. It was like kind of its own, like it is right now. It's kind of like its own country, essentially. So they're like doing their own thing. They didn't like care about like what other people were doing. Like, no joke. It's like similar to nowadays. So it was one of the last few Confederate states that was still like actively practicing slavery. And so then, and on top of that, there wasn't apparently that many like Union troops to kind of enforce this executive order. So that's kind of how it was being enforced in other states too. It was the Union troops that were in those other states. They were the ones enforcing it because not everybody was like super gung-ho about like following the rules at this point. So the Union troops were like, hey, nope, no slavery here, no slavery there. And Texas, like I said, since it was its own little thing, they were just kind of doing their own thing. And like there wasn't that many Union troops there to enforce anything. So General Gordon, I forget the other part of his name, but he came and he signed like an order. I think it was called, what was it called? It was called, I'm not going to remember the name of this. Oh, wow. It's called General Order Number 3. So he signed General Order Number 3, and that was like no slavery in Texas anymore. And so since it was like kind of one of the last and final states, and obviously probably the biggest, wait, it is, yes, Texas is the biggest state. Or is it Alaska? I don't know. That's a different topic. Like I said, I'm retarded. That was kind of the celebration. It was like, okay, like this is a big deal. The biggest state just pretty much officially ended slavery. It still wasn't legally ended because it was, and this is the third most important date to remember, it was ratified into the Constitution, into the 13th Amendment, on December 6th of that year. So 1865. That's when it was like actually put into the Constitution that slavery is illegal and you can't practice slavery anymore. So that's the third most important date, but essentially it was enforced and pretty much official at that point. And yeah, June 19th of 1865. And then people started celebrating Juneteenth, the following year. So 1866, people started celebrating. And yeah, ever since then, it's kind of been maybe sort of like a low-key celebration until in 2021, they decided to officially make it a federal holiday, and everybody, began celebrating it more officially. So that's the story of Juneteenth. There's definitely probably other things that I missed. That's just the general gist of it. And yeah, it's pretty cool. I will probably go eat some red velvet cake now. If you have any questions or if you want to make any corrections to my videos, I would highly appreciate the feedback. I would also appreciate some more subscribers because I have like 5 and having more would be great. I don't know. Anyways, thanks for watching. Have a great weekend or Friday or whatever day it is that you're watching this video. I feel like you probably wouldn't be watching it on a Friday or on any other day besides Friday though, just because it's a Juneteenth topic. Anyway, okay, bye.